1888. Half a square mile of brick, soot, gas lamps, and rooming houses. 76,000 people lived inside it. Most slept in beds rented by the hour. A doss house bed cost 4 pence a night. Most women couldn't make it. The streets ran open sewers. Children worked at 6. Tuberculosis killed 20 residents a week. Sir Charles Warren, Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, called it the worst quarter mile in the British Empire. The streets were lit by paraffin gas lamps spaced 80 yards apart. In those 50 yards, a woman could be killed without anyone hearing. He had been walking these streets long before he started. He knew which lamps were broken, which constables walked which beats, which yards had a back exit. On August 7th, 1888, in the morning, a soldier's widow named Martha Tabram became the rehearsal. 1888. A widow was found on a landing with 39 stab wounds. A cab driver named Alfred Crow lived on the 3rd floor. He climbed the stairs at 3:30 a.m. He stepped over what he thought was a sleeping woman. At 5 a.m., a laborer named John Reeves came down the stairs and noticed a pool of blood. He ran for a constable. Police surgeon Dr. Timothy Colleen arrived at 5:30 a.m. 39 stab wounds to the throat, the chest, the abdomen, the genitals. Most of the wounds had been inflicted after death. 2 different weapons had been used. One, an ordinary pocket knife, the other, a longer blade. Inspector Edmund Reed of H Division, CID, took the case. He canvassed every soldier on leave that week. He interviewed every prostitute on the strip. He had no fingerprint science, no blood typing. He had a widow with 39 stab wounds and no witnesses. 3 weeks later, on August 31st, the same investigator was called to a stable gateway on Bucks Road. Charles Cross, a carman on his way to work, notices a dark shape lying in a gateway. At first, he thinks it's a tarpaulin. Then he sees the legs. Another carman, Robert Paul, stops to help. Together, they examine the figure in the darkness. They think the woman is drunk. A police constable arrives with a lantern. The light exposes the truth. Her throat has been cut twice. One wound nearly reaches the spine. The body is still warm. The killer cannot be far away. At the mortuary, she is identified as Mary Ann Polly Nichols. Just hours earlier, she had joked about earning enough money for a bed that night. Within an hour, she was dead. Later that afternoon, Detective Inspector Frederick Aberline of Scotland Yard arrives in Whitechapel. He has investigated crime for 15 years. He has never seen wounds like these before. Whitechapel better than almost anyone in London. Scotland Yard sent him in the day after Polly Nichols was murdered. 45 years old, Aberline had spent years policing Whitechapel's streets. He knew the lodging houses, the alleyways, the people. He set up operations at Leman Street Police Station and began building a suspect list. He interviewed prostitutes, butchers, surgeons, anyone who might fit the crime. But this was 1888. No fingerprints, no DNA, no forensic blood analysis, only witness statements and detective work. The killer had left almost nothing behind. Then, just 8 days later, a telegram arrived. Another woman had been found dead. Aberline had not even finished investigating the first murder. 29 Hanbury Street, Whitechapel. Just after 5:50 a.m., a market porter named John Davis stepped into the backyard. He immediately spotted the body near the rear steps. The victim was Annie Chapman, 47 years old. Her injuries closely resembled those seen in the murder of Polly Nichols, but this time, the violence was even more extreme. Dr. George Bagster Phillips examined the scene. His conclusion was troubling. The killer appeared to possess some knowledge of anatomy. The injuries had been inflicted quickly and with purpose. Investigators estimated the entire attack may have taken only minutes. A witness named Elizabeth Long reported seeing Annie speaking with a man shortly before her death. The conversation seemed ordinary. It was likely the last conversation Annie Chapman ever had. The killer had struck again, and once more he vanished into the streets of Whitechapel before anyone could stop him. Papers began promoting a mysterious figure known as Leather Apron. The story spread rapidly across across London. Fear gripped Whitechapel. Rumors turned into suspicion. Crowds began confronting local residents and demanding answers. Under growing pressure, police arrested a man named John Pizer. Pizer was a bootmaker who worked with leather and sometimes wore a leather apron. Detectives questioned him extensively. His alibis checked out completely. He had nothing to do with the murders. But by then, his name had already appeared in newspapers across Britain. Pizer later sued for libel and won. The leather apron suspect had collapsed. The public still wanted a monster. Within weeks, the killer would be given a new name, a name the world would never forget. A group of merchants met at the Crown Public House on Mile End Road. They formed the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee. Its president was George Lusk, a 49-year-old builder and decorator. The committee raised money, hired patrolmen, and organized nightlife watches. Volunteers carried whistles, lanterns, and walking sticks as they searched the streets from midnight until dawn. Reward notices appeared across Whitechapel, offering money for information leading to the killer's capture. Night after night, the patrols walked the streets. They found nothing. The killer remained invisible. Inspector Frederick Aberline met with George Lusk and encouraged the effort. Yet despite hundreds of extra eyes on the streets, the murders continued. The Vigilance Committee would spend months searching for the killer. They would never see him. But in October, the killer would make sure George Lusk noticed him. 7th, 1888. A London news agency received a letter that would change the case forever. Written in red ink and addressed to the boss. The author mocked the police and claimed responsibility for the Whitechapel murders. He promised there would be more victims. At the bottom of the page was a name nobody had seen before: Jack the Ripper. It was the first known use of the name that would become infamous around the world. When the letter reached Scotland Yard, Chief Inspector Donald Swanson reviewed it. Like many investigators, he suspected it was a hoax. By then, police were receiving countless false letters from attention seekers. The decision was made not to take the message seriously. Then, on September 30th, 2 more women were murdered. Suddenly, the letter seemed far more important. Scotland Yard faced an uncomfortable possibility. Either the writer knew the killer, or the writer was the killer. 1888. The night became known as the Double Event. 2 women were murdered less than an hour apart. Just after midnight, Louis Diemschutz drove his pony cart into Dutfield's yard on Berner Street. The pony suddenly stopped. A body was lying beside the wall. The victim was Elizabeth Long Liz Stride, 44 years old. Her injuries matched the earlier Whitechapel murders, but something was different. The attack appeared incomplete. Doctors estimated she had died only minutes before being discovered. Many investigators believed the killer had been interrupted. Police flooded the area and searched the surrounding streets. They found nothing. The killer had vanished once again. But the night wasn't over. Less than an hour later, another body would be discovered nearly a mile away. Whitechapel was about to witness its most infamous night. Square had been empty. At 1:45 a.m., Police Constable Edward Watkins crossed the square again during his routine patrol. This time, a body lay in the darkness. The victim was Catherine Eddowes, 46 years old. The injuries were the most severe investigators had seen so far. Doctors concluded the killer had worked with extraordinary speed. The entire attack may have taken less than 10 minutes. Watkins immediately sounded his whistle and called for assistance. Eddowes had been released from police custody barely 45 minutes earlier. Now she was the second victim of the night. The murders of Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes would become known as the Double Event. But this time, the killer made a mistake. A short distance from Mitre Square, a police officer discovered a piece of blood-stained apron. Nearby, written on a wall in chalk, was a message that would become one of the most debated clues in criminal history. Appeared to leave behind a message. At 2:55 a.m., Police Constable Alfred Long discovered a piece of blood-stained apron in a doorway on Goulston Street. The cloth was later linked to victim Catherine Eddowes, but it wasn't the cloth that drew attention. Above it, written in chalk on the wall, was a short message. Detectives immediately recognized its potential importance. Word spread quickly through the police ranks. Before dawn, Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Charles Warren arrived at the scene. Whitechapel was already on edge, and fears of unrest were growing. Warren made a choice. He ordered the writing erased. No photograph was taken. The message disappeared forever. Historians still argue about what it meant and whether it was connected to the killer at all. What may have been the most important clue in the entire investigation was wiped away before sunrise. The mystery remained, and Whitechapel's killer remained unidentified. A new letter arrived in London. October 1st, 1888. The Central News Agency receives a postcard written in red ink. The handwriting appears to match the infamous Dear Boss letter. The writer claims responsibility for the previous night's murders. More importantly, the postcard references details that had not yet been widely reported. Suddenly, investigators have a problem. Either the writer is the killer or someone remarkably close to the investigation. The postcard is signed with a name the public is beginning to recognize: Jack the Ripper. Scotland Yard releases both letters to the press. Newspapers across Britain print the name. Within days, the unknown killer has an identity known around the world. Inspector Frederick Aberline now has a name. He even has a possible handwriting sample, but he still doesn't have a face, and Whitechapel's worst weeks are still ahead. The Whitechapel investigation took a disturbing turn. George Lusk, president of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, received a small package in the mail. Inside was a handwritten note and a preserved human organ. Lusk initially assumed it was a cruel prank, but doctors examined the contents and reached a troubling conclusion. The organ appeared to belong to a woman. It also matched details from the recent murder of Catherine Eddowes. Suddenly, the package looked far more serious. The accompanying letter claimed responsibility and taunted investigators. Scotland Yard believed the evidence might be genuine, but in 1888, forensic science could not prove it. They were left with suspicion, not certainty. For the first time, the killer appeared to be communicating directly with the people hunting him. The murders were no longer just crimes. They were becoming a for Whitechapel. Residents slept with weapons beside their beds. Streets emptied after dark. Newspapers published daily updates on the Ripper investigation. Curious visitors even traveled from wealthier parts of London to see the neighborhood for themselves. Many local women began traveling in groups. Others left Whitechapel altogether. The Whitechapel Vigilance Committee grew into a force of hundreds of volunteers. Police flooded the district with extra officers and nightly patrols. Yet despite the manhunt, the killer vanished. For 41 days, there were no new murders linked to the case. Some wondered if he had left London. Others feared he was simply waiting. Then, on November 8, 1888, a 25-year-old woman named Mary Jane Kelly was seen spending the evening in Whitechapel. Hours later, behind the locked door of a small room in Miller's Court, the Ripper would strike again. This time, no one interrupted him, and the case was about to reach its darkest chapter. 88. He finally had what he had never had before. A locked room. Privacy. Time. 13 Miller's Court. A tiny rented room in Whitechapel. At 10:45 a.m., rent collector Thomas Boyer knocked on the door. No answer. He looked through a broken window pane. Then he ran for help. Inspector Walter Beck arrived. Then Frederick Aberline. Then Commissioner James Monroe. The victim was Mary Jane Kelly. Investigators quickly realized this crime was different from all the others. Dr. Thomas Bond estimated the killer may have spent nearly 2 hours inside the room. A fire still burned in the grate. For the first time, the killer had been able to work without interruption. The scene became the most infamous crime scene of the entire Whitechapel investigation. 2 days later, a man named George Hutchinson walked into a police station. He claimed he had seen Kelly with a suspicious man shortly before her death. For the first time, Aberline believed he might have a real description of the killer. 1888. A laborer named George Hutchinson walked into a police station and claimed he had seen Mary Kelly with a stranger hours before her murder. George Hutchinson was an unemployed laborer who who lived only a few blocks from Miller's court. He told Inspector Aberline that Mary Kelly had approached him at around 2 a.m. asking for sixpence. He had no money to give her. Moments later, a well-dressed man approached Kelly and walked away with her. Hutchinson watched them beneath a gas lamp and memorized the man's appearance. Dark complexion, dark eyes, small mustache, dark coat, white collar, black tie with a horseshoe pin. Hutchinson said the man looked like a gentleman. He followed the pair to Miller's court and claimed he watched the entrance for nearly 45 minutes. Inspector Aberline personally interviewed him and believed the account. Detectives spent days searching Whitechapel for the man Hutchinson described. They never found him. Hutchinson's statement became the most detailed witness description in the entire Ripper investigation. The well-dressed stranger he described has remained the face of Jack the Ripper for more than a century. He has never been identified. Scotland Yard surgeon Dr. Thomas Bond wrote the first criminal profile in police history. He was profiling a ghost. November 10th, 1888, Scotland Yard. Dr. Thomas Bond submits a report on the Whitechapel murders to Assistant Commissioner Robert Anderson. His conclusions are striking. The killer is probably middle-aged, solitary, quiet, and outwardly respectable. A man of physical strength, coolness, and daring. Bond rejects the idea that the murderer is a surgeon. He believes the wounds were made with an ordinary knife, not a surgical instrument. He also believes the killer lives locally, within walking distance of the crime scenes. Most importantly, Bond believes the murders will continue. They don't. After November 9th, 1888, the canonical Ripper murders stop completely. Scotland Yard never learns whether the killer died, moved away, was imprisoned for another crime, or simply disappeared into London forever. Suspects. The names have rotated for more than a century. None has ever been proven. 1894. Chief Constable Melville McNaughton identifies 3 leading suspects. Montague Druitt, a barrister who died weeks after Mary Kelly's murder. Aaron Kosminski, a mentally ill hairdresser later confined to an asylum. Michael Ostrog, a career criminal later largely ruled out by researchers. Inspector Aberline preferred a different suspect. Severin Klosowski, better known as the serial poisoner George Chapman. The detectives could not agree on who Jack the Ripper was. More importantly, none of them could prove it. In the 138 years since, the suspect list has grown to over 100 names. Princes, doctors, artists, politicians. The murders have been blamed on almost every kind of man, except one with proof. The Whitechapel murders file is closed. Witness statements, autopsy reports, suspect notes. The boxes are stored by Scotland Yard and remain sealed for decades. In 1908, Sir Robert Anderson publicly names Aaron Kosminski as the killer. In 1939, Detective Walter Dew publishes his memoirs. He refuses to name a suspect. In 1988, researchers finally gain limited access to the surviving files. Some documents are missing, others are incomplete. Then come the new theories. A diary claiming to belong to the killer. A disputed DNA claim pointing to Kosminski. Neither is accepted as conclusive. 138 years after Mary Kelly's murder, the most famous killer in British history has never been identified. The files are open. The conclusion is missing. One kidney, one name written in chalk. He killed for 77 days. The world has been hunting him for 138 years. The canonical 5. Marianne Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. All lived in Whitechapel. All were poor. All were killed within the same half-square mile. The men who hunted the killer, Aberline, Warren, Dew, all died without an answer. Over the next century, the suspect list grew. Doctors, barbers, artists. He never had to be any of those. He only had to be local, quiet, patient, smart enough to avoid being caught. More than a century later, Jack the Ripper remains unidentified. The first modern serial killer and the only one who truly disappeared.